My uncle and his wife lived in this old cabin out in the mountains. By old, I don't just mean it had been there for a few decades. Everything about it was practically ancient. It had no electricity or heating other than a single old stove, and had no indoor plumbing either. When I visited, I had to bring lots of soda and bottled water because there was no running water at the cabin. It was really about as rustic as I could imagine it getting, but I enjoyed visiting that place. These sorts of places are nice to go to, as long as I was only going for a short visit. Usually when I was visiting my grandma with my parents, my uncle would come down as well and take me up to the cabin for a few nights. This particular visit, I was visiting during the very late fall. It was in fact the weekend after Thanksgiving, I believe. We drove up there on Friday, and I was to stay until Saturday morning. That Friday evening was not really anything special. However, on Saturday, a friend of my uncle's came and asked for his help. He and my aunt left early in the afternoon, but insisted they would not be gone for very long. Not too long after they'd initially left, the sky blackened very quickly, and snow began to fall. It fell hard and it fell heavy, quickly coating the ground. I was concerned whether my uncle would be able to come back at all to the cabin. He drove a Jeep, but the roads were very thin already, and now they would be thin and slippery. If he wasn't able to make it back, I would have no way to get in contact with him. There was no phone or any other communication device in the cabin. The snow continued piling up, and the afternoon came and went. When night fell, the snow was piled really high. I had never been in that cabin by myself before, especially late at night. I was really frightened because of this. I was concerned I wasn't going to see my uncle return that day, and I really did not want to be out here all alone. When the snow had piled up insanely high and it was extremely dark outside, I was convinced my uncle was not going to be coming back anytime soon. As I mentioned previously, there was no phone, so he couldn't call me to let me know either. I went out onto the porch to make sure I had enough wood for the fire. Then I noticed a single headlight coming towards the cabins. I knew immediately that whoever this was not my uncle. It appeared to be someone on a snowmobile of some sort. My uncle had taken his truck with him and didn't always hang out with the best people either. In fact, he knew a lot of drug dealers and such. I didn't want to come in contact with someone I didn't know, so I quickly gathered up my firewood and made my way back into the cabin. I locked the door and put my wood down by the stove. I didn't have any of the lanterns on, so other than the smoke from the stovetop, there was no indication anyone was there. The snowmobile pulled up quietly, and I peeked out the window. I saw the outline of a large man coming towards the house. I wondered why anyone would be out in the middle of such a violent snowstorm. The man began to pound on the door. I didn't answer or make any sound. I hoped he would know my uncle wasn't there, based on the fact that his truck wasn't there either. I guess in hindsight, the smoke from the chimney contradicted that. There was a furious pounding at the door, and I decided to simply continue remaining quiet. Yeah, I know. I didn't exactly know for sure there was a reason to be scared right now, but I really didn't want to interact with any of my uncle's quote-unquote friends all by myself. When there was no answer, the guy began putting his full body weight on the door. He began screaming out my uncle's name loudly. When the pounding didn't get him an answer, he began to try to force the door open. It wasn't a thick door at all. In fact, it was very thin. For some reason, it held even though it rattled furiously. I thought the guy had eventually given up because the door stopped rattling for a few moments. It was quiet for a while. I thought the guy had moved away already. Then though, I heard a really loud slamming noise. The door rattled again. Then, once more, it was quiet. The light shining from the snowmobile was soon gone as the vehicle raced off into the night. I grabbed one of the lanterns and turned it on. I was startled when I saw the blade end of a huge knife stuck in the door. I quickly turned off the lantern just in case the guy was coming back. I crawled into a cupboard by the stove and eventually fell asleep. My uncle and his wife came back in the morning. He walked into the house with a knife in his hand and a sheet of paper as well. I assumed it was a note from the guy last night who was riding the snowmobile. It had obviously been pierced by the blade of the knife to stick it in the door. My uncle didn't tell me what was written on the paper, and after I told him about the visit, he took me down off the mountains and never told me about what happened that night. The most frightening thing to ever happen to me just happened to happen during the worst snowstorm I have ever experienced. I live in an apartment building. It was a bit of a middle-income sort of place. It wasn't too fancy, but it wasn't bad either. I lived alone. The storm itself had started the previous night. The snow fell steadily throughout the night, and when I woke up in the morning, it was still dark out. The sky was also still overcast. The snow had piled up in the meantime, and it didn't seem to be stopping anytime soon. I got a phone call from my place of work, telling me not to come in. They had closed because of the storm and all the piling snow. I spent the day watching the snow fall down and becoming a bit stir-crazy. It was obviously too dangerous to risk driving somewhere in that sort of weather, and I wasn't the type to just sit around and watch TV or even read all day either. I liked being out and about in the world. Like I said though, I would have been stupid to attempt to drive in that weather. The day was spent mostly watching TV and trying to do random exercises around the house, using some of my at-home exercise equipment. It was a poor substitute for what they had at a gym. When I went to bed that night, the snow still had not stopped falling though. I had never witnessed a storm like this. I went to bed and didn't sleep that great. Really, it was just hard to sleep at all, as I hadn't really been able to relax during the daytime. I got up sometime during the night to go use the bathroom. I was used to stumbling around my apartment in the dark. I went inside and peed, then flushed the toilet before I groggily stumbled back to bed. I decided though that I should quickly go and check to see if the snow was still falling. I pushed aside the curtain, and the building light hurt my eyes for a moment. When they adjusted, I peeked outside the window and saw there was still a steady fall of snow. Okay, well, I guessed I would be off the following day from work as well. I let go of the curtain and turned around. For a split second though, I thought I saw some sort of mud or something on my carpet, something that hadn't been there before. I was guessing in the moment it was an optical illusion, but knowing I wouldn't be able to go back to sleep until I checked this mystery out, I went over and turned on the light. I was completely shocked to see that there were prints all over my carpet. I held my breath when I saw the prints came from my front door, went down the hallway and into my bedroom, and then stopped there. I knew they couldn't be my own because I hadn't gone outside at all during the day. I knew inside that I should probably just leave, but I needed to know what was going on first. I slowly crept my way over to the bedroom. I turned on the hallway light, which illuminated part of my room. Then I peeked inside. I could see, just out of sight, lying under my bed, seemingly looking right at me, was a man. That means he'd been under my bed while I was sleeping the entire time. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my cell phone and ran out of the apartment. It was still the middle of the night. I didn't want to knock on anyone's doors. However, there was a laundry room on my floor. The door was wide open. I ran inside, then closed and bolted it behind me. From there, I called the police, and I didn't leave that laundry room until they arrived soon after. Although the guy had already fled my apartment, they found him hiding on another floor of the building. He was arrested and charged with trespassing. He had 2 knives on him. It turns out they tied him to several other break-ins in the neighborhood as well. This happened not too long after I moved to England. Back then, and still to this day even, my country's living conditions weren't all that great, with everything getting worse every year, low salaries and high cost of living. I decided I had had enough. Not too long before that, my best friend had moved to England with her boyfriend and her dog. They lived in a house with a spare room, so we planned it out. I moved to their house and shared the rent, while I tried to find a job and my own place. We didn't last too long in that arrangement though, as 2 weeks after I'd moved in, we moved into a different house altogether. The house itself was supposed to be way better, but the neighborhood it was in, well, let's just say it had a lot to improve on. The real problem though was that my friends had that dog, and most nights they would get into huge fights about who was the most tired from work, who worked the hardest, who did the most at home, other nonsense I didn't really have the patience to endure. Because of this, I would always end up offering to take the dog for his walk myself, just so I wouldn't have to listen to them fight anymore. It would usually go pretty well, I think especially because this was around pandemic time, so there were a lot less people out on the street. One night though was very different. When I offered to take the dog and walked out of the house with him, I had this strange feeling already. Like that night I shouldn't have offered to go and should have just stayed home or something. Then again, maybe it was best it was me and not my friend. Back then I was 25, going on 26. Well-built and broad-shouldered and could easily hold my own in a fight. Even though I'm not particularly tall, I would probably present a bigger threat than my friend still. I went down the stairs, walked out of the building with a trash bag in hand, dumped the bag, and went on my way to the close entrance. As always, when I got to the main road, because I like to keep the walks different and fresh for the dog, I looked both ways to decide which way to go tonight. That's when, to my left, I noticed a man jogging in my direction. What troubled me, though, was that he was jogging in completely normal day-to-day clothes, not dressed to go out for a run at all. I didn't want to be judging though, and didn't want to make myself uneasy for no reason, so I decided to just walk the other way and try to ignore this guy. If he really was running my way, I would simply cross the road and see where he went. I wasn't the only one feeling uncomfortable though, because the dog was refusing to just go about our way. He was an intense dog with a massive focus when it came to trouble, a mix between a bulldog and a Portuguese hunting dog breed. So he was medium-sized, muscular, and had this habit of staring people down in a way that would make everyone uncomfortable. That's exactly what he did in that moment. I turned to my right, started walking down the street, and had to pull the dog along every 5 seconds. He just would not stop turning around and staring at this guy, who was still about 30 seconds of jogging away from us. I was now keeping my eye on the guy as well, taking advantage of having to pull the dog along to keep measuring just how far the guy was from us. When he was starting to get too close for comfort, I decided to cross the street. If he was just running past, he would be on his way. If something else was happening here though, he would cross the street as well. Of course, that's exactly what happened. When I started crossing the street, the guy made the same move right behind me. I decided to stop in place and let the dog stare the guy down to see what would come of this interaction. Instantly, it was like I had messed everything up for him. He looked surprised, stopped running, and stayed in place. He then lifted his hands like he was surrendering. "Hey man, all good bro, all good?" I simply replied, "All good, you?" "Yeah, boss, yeah." Then he walked ahead of us and finished crossing the road. I went back to the same side I'd been on initially and thought that would be it. No further trouble. Then though, the guy stopped again, turned around, saw I was not on his side of the road anymore, and did the weirdest shit. He took 2 steps back up the road and just hid behind a tree. It was like he was hiding from someone else that was ahead on the street. This made me even more uncomfortable. I now had to control my shaking legs, adrenaline, and increasing heartbeat, and not give my discomfort away. I kept walking ahead and walked past the guy hiding behind the tree on the opposite side of the road. I looked him in the eye to warn him without having to say anything and kept on walking. 10 more steps was all it took. With this strange hiding guy behind me, I heard something shuffle up ahead in the street. Initially, I thought it could be an animal, but I stopped. I listened closer and decided the shuffling sound sounded like it was coming from something way bigger than just a dog or a fox or something. Certainly another person. That's when I noticed it. There was someone else hiding behind one of the upcoming house's trash cans, just waiting for me to get there. I could see part of their back sticking out from one of the sides. I don't know if me and the dog could have taken them or not, but I decided I would not risk it in that moment, let alone risk the dog's life as well. I turned around and swiftly started walking up the street again. I walked past the first guy, who was still huddled behind the same tree. I nodded to him. The surprise on his face confirmed everything to me. He must not have been expecting me to understand what was going on and see that guy hiding further ahead. They certainly were not expecting me to simply turn around and walk away. Heck, I doubt the first guy even expected me to notice him hiding at all. For the night, I decided to just let the dog do his business in the grass area behind our building, and that was it. Considering this is a very dangerous and high-crime neighborhood, which just keeps on getting worse, and a month later my boss's son and his friends were mugged at knife point with a machete just up the road from where this happened, I think I made the right choice that night. This is one of those stories that might not really seem too scary, more weird and creepy. Whenever I tell this to people, they sometimes laugh. Other times, they shudder at the pure strangeness of it. I guess it's important to know that when this happened, we didn't have any snow on the ground. It had snowed nearly a week previously. The snow had all melted in the meantime. This occurred in the evening. I had a friend over for dinner. I had the meal all prepared and had the table all set as well. My friend was sitting at the table waiting to eat when my doorbell suddenly rang. I was caught off guard because I really didn't know anyone else in the building. The only reason I could figure someone would ring my doorbell was if they were complaining about noise or selling something. I really didn't make too much noise. I told my friend he could begin eating, and I would go check the door to see who this was. I got up and walked down the hallway to the apartment door. When opening it, I saw the strangest sight I'd ever seen in my life. There was a little boy standing at the door. He was wearing a thick winter coat that was covered in snow. It was as if he had just come inside from the snow. Only there wasn't any snow outside for him to come inside from. I must have done a double take or something. I wasn't sure what to make. It was surely a strange sight. Not only that, but the boy didn't say anything either. He just kinda stood there, staring at his feet. The snow was melting and dripping from his coat onto the carpeted floor. I asked this child if I could help him with something. He didn't look up, but he did slightly shake his head no. He just stood there. I asked him if I knew him from somewhere or something. Again, he didn't look up, just shook his head for a brief moment. I was at a loss as to what was going on here. Finally, the little boy whispered something I'll never forget. In a small voice, he said, "Sometimes people die in the cold." Then he went back to doing nothing, except staring at the floor. I was concerned for this child, obviously. I decided I would go and get my friend. I retrieved him, but when we got back to the door, the boy was already gone. There was only a red spot on the floor where he'd been. We looked for him throughout the building, but we couldn't find him anywhere. I reported this incident to the apartment manager, just in case someone was looking for the boy. The situation was way too weird though. I mean, I had no idea why he was covered with snow, but there was certainly no snow on the ground outside. I had no idea where he went either. When he was done talking to me, he just sort of disappeared. Most of all, I have no idea why he said what he said in that moment. Now, this might not seem too scary to you, but it sure as hell scared me at the time. What is up guys, Blue Spooky here as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys liked the video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you do decide to subscribe, make sure you hit that bell button and set notifications to all so you can get notified when I post my new video every day. If you guys have anything you'd like to say about the stories in the video or my narration, please be sure to leave it in the comments below, as I always love reading your guys' comments. If you guys have a story you'd like to send in yourself, please be sure to look in the description below the video. There will be links to all my social media, including my Facebook, Twitter, and Gmail accounts. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has a type, and how you'd like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. If you decide to send in a story, please be sure to include proper formatting such as paragraphs and spacing, and as much detail as you feel comfortable including, to make sure it has the highest chance of appearing in a video in the future. Also, if you guys like the stories in this video, please be sure to check the description. There will be a link to my friend Killer Orange Cat's channel. We share stories between us, so if you like my narration, I'm sure you'll like his stuff as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. I think that's it for now, so I hope you guys have a great day.